No, we are.
Well, welcome back again. Appreciate everybody coming back. Last time we ran a little long, so we'll try to kind of keep the pace moving tonight, so we'll get you out hopefully a little early this evening. But we're kind of looking at where do we go next. We went through a lot of our education. We've gone through the comprehensive plan from 2010. So tonight we were going to kind of start out with a couple of projects that are kind of ongoing, just as informational. Then start talking about we've received a couple of requests already for rezoning. We'll take a quick look at those. We're not looking for a decision tonight, just kind of, hey, here's some of the stuff we're starting to hear. And then start talking about, who else do you want to bring in? We've kind of got a list of people we think might be helpful. We've heard from recreation, but, what about the library? What about DPW? As well as outside groups. Is there other people you want to hear from, whether it be developers, whether it be conservationists, whether it be emergency services, who else would you like us to bring in? And then we can start coordinating future meetings to have them come in and, be able to answer questions or provide, additional information to their group. Then we'll start looking at, areas around the town. What are your thoughts? What do you see for the future? Kind of working into that. So that's kind of our thought, but obviously we're here to take direction from you guys, so that's kind of where we're thinking of going next with is kind of we've done with our piece. We may want to hear from other people that can speak to their expertise or their stuff that's near and dear to them.
We eventually do want to take you on a tour some point in time, and it gets a little later out earlier, and get you out and get you home at a reasonable time. To look at some of these properties, and it's our intent not to sway you one way or the other as to whatever you think should or should not occur on these properties. That's up to you. But people are bringing these properties to our attention, and we're acting as the conduit to get it to you, so that you can take a look and see what you think as part of the overall future land use management plan for the town. So that'll happen probably as it gets a little bit warmer and a little bit later out. And we'll get you out and take a look at all these sites. You certainly, once we start talking about these sites, you can certainly go out and look at them yourself and get an opinion on your own as to what you think about them and what they should be or should not be. And certainly you can bring that back to the committee and talk about that as well. So you're not obligated to have to go out with us to go out and look at these sites. You can do it on your own time.
And just to tack on to that, as we've covered before, when you look at these sites, you can't look at them individually. You have to look at the area around them too, because we don't just rezone one parcel for one parcel. We have to look at the entire area. So keep that in mind as you're going around town and these sites come up as we go through our process here. But you start with one, you look at the surrounding area, and that's how you really have to start your evaluation. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. It's my turn again?
It's your turn.
Okay. Item 1 is going to be pretty quick. Just 2 projects that we wanted to highlight. We also did receive a bunch of applications for our March plan agenda, so we can go over those at future meetings. We want to have the public hearing process start first, and then we can show you guys at a later date. I think we got 6 applications last week, so the spring is gearing up real quick. But again, we'll talk about those after the planning board's had a chance to hear that in a public hearing setting. So what we'll cover tonight is just 2 quick ones for you. The first is Penfield Square. That's that mixed-use application that we talked about once before by Home Leasing. They were recently approved by the planning board for their overall site plan. And I'm just going to see if this... Oh, that one didn't help me. That's not the one I wanted. There we go.
Let the lights dim down.
We got enough. I can zoom.
Nice.
So this is just a quick recap of it. It was total of 173 residential units. We have 113 independent living, and then 70 as a combination of memory care and assisted living. And then we have a mix of non-residential uses throughout the site. And again, this was recently just approved by the planning board. Architecture was approved for all elements. This landscape was approved by the board. They're still working through some of the decorative lighting that's going on through these pedestrian corridors, but overall the parking and building mounted lights have been done. Pedestrian connectivity was a huge part of the conversation. We went through iterations of different crosswalks designs, widths of sidewalks, width of this pedestrian promenade through the middle here. We went through the review of this bridge element that connects the 2 buildings. Clearly you can see a lot of outdoor space, interactive space. as well as, this one doesn't show it too much. Did a lot of conversation.
I made it.
Sorry.
You have arrived. You have arrived. Great time.
Trying to look this up. Sorry.
This is just north of the YMCA
Right.
on 250.
Yeah.
It's the current site of Wickham Farms that they're going to be relocating from. We spent a lot of time here in this what's labeled as the town green. This is a 1 acre 1 acre area within the site that's kind of going to be a very interactive green space that has hardscapes, greenscapes throughout. It has stormwater designs built into it as well for rain gardens. This is actually a plateaued area, so this will drop in elevation to kind of give a stepped effect for people. So it's not just dead flat space. It kind of has its own little areas as you go through it. So again, very interactive space. Another garden area here. So you can clearly see a theme of walkability, connectivity, and a mix of uses that are both for what will be residents in this development, but also residents for the town of Penfield to come and explore this area, be a part of it, and also for those thousands and thousands and thousands of people who interact at the YMCA as well. So that one was just approved.
Quick question on,
Double question, double question. Here we go.
maybe it's the same one.
Maybe. You guys can rock, paper, scissors for it.
How much flexibility would they have to modify this? What I mean is I see AL and assisted living and independent living, if they wanted to add full senior care or change one of the things to retail or whatever. I mean, is this pretty much set in stone?
They do have the ability to come back to the planning board and ask for modifications. Depending on what the request is, it may or may not trigger another public hearing. Typically, when we see modifications like that, we would address it in a work session. But they do have the ability to flex some of the space around. Is the trigger that really puts into another public hearing is if it gets bigger in any case. If they're just changing the use in the space, they'll come back to the planning board and kind of go through some of that. Often that requires some architectural modifications, and that's what the board is really going to look at. And then after that, it's up to them to manage their space.
They do have to maintain that ratio of commercial to residential, though. They can't.
They can't, right, they can't convert it all to residential. So they do have to maintain these commercial uses that they have here. And they also have space here, this is known as Lot 5, where they're going to eventually explore some more mixed-use development here on a smaller scale. But they do have that space as well to work with. They want to see how this builds out and how fast it fills in.
One of the reasons I ask is just because with senior care facilities, and not common with IL and AL, but if they had full-blown senior care or a dementia unit or something, wandering's an issue, and this is a very busy road.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that just the burden's on them to address it, or if the town comes into play there, or how that would work.
Well, the assisted
Memory care
living
is
and the
on.
memory care are going to be monitored constantly. It's not going to be where you just move in and then you can wander around all night long if you want to. It's going to be monitored by staff on a consistent
Yeah,
basis.
you can
But the burden is on them.
Oh,
to
yes.
do it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
yes.
You can see the separation in space too between the memory care wing and the assisted living. Assisted living, you know, you're still, most times you're still pretty able-bodied to get around. There's just certain things you can't do. Memory care, obviously, a different level of care. So this is a secured area. This even these gardens here, these are called Tranquility. Nope. Hang on.
Memory, I don't think they're memory gardens.
Could be a memory garden. They're a special garden, but it is all fenced in. So like even if a resident does happen to go for a stroll, they're still contained within.
Someone's in the watchtower.
Yeah.
Over here.
We go that
I
far.
mean the bridge is pretty high.
Tranquilizers now.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a good question.
Another question down the end?
Is it considered a medical use, the assisted living, and I guess I'm wondering, because is that land taxable then?
They are a not-for-profit organization.
Well, it's a combination.
It's a combination. The back half.
Home leasing is a single-family or residential, so those would be market rate apartments. I believe they're targeting 55 and older, but those are taxable. The back piece is Episcopal Senior Life, so part of that falls under as residential, but they're not-for-profit, so that's something the assessor has to look at, is what's taxable and what's not. Obviously, the retail components, the cafe, the community
That's all
areas,
taxable.
those are all taxable space.
So the assessor hasn't looked at that already, is that?
I'm just not the assessor. I'm sure she has, and I'm sure she's got it all figured out. I just
Right.
don't.
can-
They've been working with her since day one on this, so she knows.
How would we
But to
know?
put it in perspective, the YMCA is not for profit.
Right, but they're already there. I'm just wondering, is
Well,
this
you'll
gonna be a
find-
net gain in taxes to the town or a loss?
They will be paying some taxes in the sense that they have to pay for all the district charges and all that business, just like we do for sanitary, storm, drainage, that type of thing.
Well, everything here is private as well. Public access, you can have access to the town green, but it's all privately paved, plowed, maintained, so your town taxes are not paying for any of the services that are there. But you could go to the cafe if you want, you can go to the retail
Right.
outlet if there's a restaurant there, or, you know, if they have a, I don't know, whatever they have.
Whatever it might be.
So at this
Juice
time,
bar
I'm
or
hearing you say
something.
that you're not able to tell us what percentage of that is taxable and what isn't?
Well, right now, I would say probably, if you're looking at it divided down the middle where the pedestrian spine is, I would say everything to this side of the pedestrian spine is probably not taxable. in
With the
sense-
exception of this commercial building, and you also have to consider that this is a 3- and 4-story building here,
Right.
and these are 2 that step down to 1. So your number of units that are in the independent living building, which is taxable, you got much more density here. So you're likely to see more gain than loss here. But again, we are not the assessor. We can't specifically answer that.
Those are apartments, they're not condominium, people aren't buying.
Apartments.
No, I'm not buying.
So the independent living is considered a for-profit?
Yes.
part of it then?
Correct.
And when Wickham was there, he was paying farm taxes?
He had a
He had an
exemption.
ag exemption.
Exemption.
How many people, just if it fills up the way they would anticipate, just how many more individuals will be living in that complex? Sort of the two halves of it together.
There's 173 units, obviously the memory care and the assisted living, some of those are singles.
Singles, right?
In the independent living, it could be, you know,
Yeah.
2 people in those, you just don't,
200-ish,
probably.
give or take. Okay.
And again, a lot of those people may already be living in Penfield who have had a house here for the last 30, 40, 50 years, can't take care of that house anymore, still want to stay in Penfield. They want to be close to the Y, and are just selling their house so they can stay.
Well,
in
we've got a lot of those calls from people, hey, when's that going up, when's it being built? I'm interested in moving in there, or my mother, my family, you know, we've had a lot of people with interest already, where is it at? Can it be done sooner, I need something now, and, you know, we get calls quite often for, you know, senior living areas and everything else, that people are always looking for, you know, senior living options, so this is, you know, definitely a great add to the town to have those options, and then, you know, have something that you can, you know, age in place if you're there, and, you know, you can, you know, move down the line as needed.
Roll you right across the street.
Not even. Go right through the bridge.
Well, I remember the 2010 comp plan said that one of the number one priorities and goals for that comp plan was to provide senior housing. We just don't have enough of it in Penfield right now. And as you remember in our education discussions, Penfield and Perrington are the 2 fastest growing towns in Monroe County right now. The average age in Penfield is 45.8 years, and most of the other towns are in their high 30s, low 40s. So there's a big discrepancy between Penfield and Perrington versus the rest of the county.
Are the independent living units, are they gonna be subsidized
Not by the town of Penfield, they're
or
not.
by the county or?
They did go to the county, I think, for some kind of aid, but I don't know if it was for construction purposes or if it was for long-term lower rents, that type of thing. I'm not sure how they work that out. We generally, as I said earlier, we generally do not provide pilot programs, and they did ask for one, but the town said no, you gotta pay for it on your own.
Any other questions on this one?
Good questions.
Our other one, which we just had a sketch plan for, is in our limited industrial area in town down by Panorama behind Thermo Fisher.
Yes.
Yep. And this is what the planning board just reviewed a sketch plan for, was for an office park similar to Linden Oaks, but it's actually on a smaller scale. It looks a little intimidating there on a plan sometimes, but this is actually smaller than Linden Oaks, believe it or not. And this is a concept plan. No approvals have been granted, but they have consolidated the lots and have begun doing preliminary layouts based on the grading and the tree clearing that they will need to do. Also showing tree preservation through here. It's a good example of what's permitted in limited industrial.
Zach, I
Office.
thought we said that was part of the floodplain though.
The lower part
This part is not.
Nailgee, the building themselves of Nailgee is wholly in the floodplain. This actually, you can't see the topography, but it rises over 100+ feet from kind of where Nailgee is going up that hill. The only part or portion that maybe
It's actually
close to the
right-
floodplain is just kind of cuts the corner of the pond that they're showing right in there.
Gotcha.
So you see a few buildings here. These are proposed, showing 40,000 square feet. Usually 2-story they're showing right now, but they are permitted up to 4. And this is a larger building here. They're showing 80,000 square feet there. They're showing the associated parking. All of this is subject to change based on the tenant needs. What they want to do is come in and get road and infrastructure done, and then they want to be able to build the structures to the design of the tenant, who may either lease or buy the building from the current owner. So this will have a long review process, several public hearings with the board. Their first step was sketch plan. They completed that. They'll be coming back in for their preliminary overalls for subdivision and the utilities that we just mentioned. And
Zach, can you talk a little bit about the frontage property out there by Penn River Trail that's kind of vacant right now?
this one,
Yeah.
they do have an option there to do some development. They have not shown it yet because they have not figured out what that would be. They're proposing a mix of uses that could be restaurant, retail, more office space. They do have that option. It just hasn't been shown here yet. And on their next iteration of plans, they will have that. It was interesting during the public hearing. We had several people in the audience asking, so what's permitted here? Are all these uses permitted that they're describing, which is office park or light manufacturing or like tech startup, things like that? And I actually read through the code, word for word, of what's permitted in limited industrial. And when I got to the adult uses, they really kind of fell out of their chairs a little bit. But it was a little interesting to kind of go through that and educate people about what's permitted here, and then kind of realizing that this is a very good use for this property, given what could actually be there in a much more greater intensity. So we just wanted to show you that tonight to give you an idea of what's kind of in the works.
Do they have clients that have, I mean, do they have like a list of proposed clients for these buildings? Is there any kind of fee?
Not yet, no. That typically happens once they get their initial approval, so they can start marketing the land for it. Without approvals, they don't market.
Yeah,
it
but
yet.
often in this cases, they would have reached out to certain commercial.
I'm sure
interests
they
to get
have.
an idea. Yeah.
I'm sure they have an idea. They haven't released.
They
that
would
to
like-
us, but I'm sure there's got to be a
Ideally-
demand for them to.
Ideally, they want Class A office space for all of it.
They're looking for corporate headquarter type design on this site. And I suspect there'll probably be some medical's obviously the biggest thing we're dealing with right now, so.
Yeah.
But they haven't come to us with anybody yet.
No.
Just a question, so in the prior comp plan, on the economic opportunities section, it stated at that time that some experts, I guess, that were consulted, said that they believe Penfield is not strategically located for a Class A office space because it is not close enough to the 490 corridor. So has that just
Well, no, I mean,
Is
if we can
that
get Class A
just-
office space, number one,
true?
it generates a lot of taxes. It has no children associated with it, so you're not impacting the school district, except positively. I'm sure they're
Oh,
very
no,
happy to
I'm
do it.
not arguing
But
that it
I'm
wouldn't be
just
a good
saying-
thing. I'm just saying,
No, I
at
think
that time, it was considered like, this is not the right place for Class A.
Well, I think what happened was, there was kind of a glut of office space around for a while.
Okay.
It's not necessarily true, well, I shouldn't say it's not true, because, you know, since the internet and the computer rage has gone on over the last several years, a lot of people that had office space are now working out of their living rooms and, you know, their basements.
Right.
But what's happened since that period of time is, especially with U of R, Rochester General, they're looking for spaces now, and you've seen the proliferation of urgent care centers and everything else that goes with it. Particularly the U of R, they've built several new buildings in Penfield over the last 10 years. That doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. And we questioned it as well. You're absolutely right. We thought, how much more office space can we really use? Because it took a while to fill up a couple of the spaces that we have in town. Over at Willow Pond took a while. That North Forest group took a while. But they did fill them. And now we're finding out that there are companies now looking to build, a lot of space so they can put their people in. So now it's a situation, and that's why we're doing this every 10 years, because it does change. And
Yeah,
we have to look at that. You as a group have to look at that now and determine what kind of recommendations should be made.
Usually that same expert or someone of similar ilk could be one of our folks come talk to.
Well, it could have been one of you guys 10 years ago.
But that's a good point.
The definition of
If we could
expert
get a
is
hold of
somebody from out of town.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well, it would be nice, for consistency, if the same organization or individual were still available, could
Well-
explain the rationale at that
Yeah.
time and why.
One of the people we're going to bring in to meet with you, a very interesting individual by the name of Matt Ingalls. And he's a professional planner. He does work all over the state. Actually, all over the eastern part of the United States. He's going to come in and he's going to talk about what's happening in terms of the demographics, what's happening in terms of what people are looking for residential type development, what they're looking for new commercial and industrial type development. He's going to be that'll be an interesting discussion with him. So that might help give you some more insight as to what you might be thinking about as time goes on.
He was part of that previous plan.
Okay, excellent.
Yes, he was, actually, that's a good point. He might have been that person. Dan?
Can I ask kind of a sidebar question that kind of ties into infrastructure and development within
Sure.
the area? What about Greenlight? And let me preface this by, I've talked to one of the representatives from Greenlight
Yep.
last week, and he said he's got some pushback from the town of Penfield and the town of Greece about development in this
No,
area.
that's not true. What happened was Greenlight, actually the president of Greenlight lives
I know he does.
next street over from me, so.
Talk to the outside
So
salesman.
he's a nice guy. The problem that they ran into is we didn't know what Greenlight was when they came to us. They haven't done a great job of really marketing themselves initially to letting us know what was going on. We have a local developer who's very tax savvy and knew that would be a real benefit for his homeowners to have. So he came to us and said, hey, I want to put Greenlight in. So nobody knew what he was talking about. And then he started talking about the fact that he would have to cut into the right-of-way at certain locations to run the lines. Well, usually when somebody comes to us and says they want to cut into our right-of-ways, whether it's along the side of the macadam surface or in it, they have to provide us with a letter of credit to ensure that they do it properly and restore everything to its prior state. And they weren't willing to do that at that point in time. So that was where the confusion arose. The developer took care of that himself in his letter of credit, and of course everything worked out fine. So we're actually very supportive of Greenlight. I know all my neighbors are trying to get on the bandwagon to get it done.
So are we.
So, but that leads into a good segue to another issue is as we're going along as a group, and one of the things, you saw all the goals and priorities for the last one, the one you didn't see was sustainability. So we're gonna have to talk about things like green light, geothermal, and solar, and wind, and all these other things. That's gonna be something you're gonna have to start thinking about is building into that document for the next 10 years. Green light and God knows what else, what other technology will occur over the next 10 years. It'll be phenomenal, I think, to see it. Just since the last 10 years, it was amazing. So, yes, I mean, that's a very important component to what's happening.
So what should I tell him when I see him tomorrow night at darts?
Did you sign up yet?
No, I did not, but I told him I was going to talk to you guys.
It's kind of, no, we're very
we've met,
supportive
we've
of them.
talked
I'd
about
love to have them. The problem is it's kind of an awkward way of doing things. They're coming to neighborhoods and they're getting people to try and sign up, and you got to pay them their $50 to do it. And if everybody pays their $50, then they start doing the engineering. And I'm not sure there's a guarantee as to whether or not it'll go in, just because the engineering might determine that it's going to be not cost effective to do it the way that we'd want to do it, or they'd want to do it. But I'm praying that something happens here soon where they are able to just come in and start working from neighborhood to neighborhood to get it done.
Mark can probably update you on that.
Yeah, and I say, we did, there was a seminar through APWA a few weeks ago. We met with Greenlight. They did a presentation. We talked with them there. They are currently on State Road. They're currently working with the Villas of East Hampton neighborhood to install Greenlight, and they're also working with Camden Park. So they're in Silverwoods already. and they're working in 2 other neighborhoods. So to say we don't have them, we're opposed to them, they're currently working on designs and projects right now. So
Yeah,
tell them to call us
get here.
if they want. We've said, come on out and meet with us, and
Obviously, it
we'd
was
be happy to-
it was an impromptu conversation over beers and darts, but I figured
tell them
Tell 'em to keep going.
give us a call, and
obviously our growth and development as a town, because it's a huge asset.
It certainly is.
Technology.
But the other towns are having the same issue. I mean, it's just hard to get a starting point and then have, because they rely a lot on the existing high wires. Then they have to cut and go underground in certain locations. So it's been difficult for them just because there's just so much to do. But yeah, I'm hoping that they get through and get the entire town signed up before they're done.
we shared with them mixed use was going on, and they were very interested with that. So we said, come on in, we'll share plans, at least what we know. It's obviously a lot easier and cheaper for them to go in during new construction than trying to retrofit a neighborhood and go back after it's complete.
Some of the other things, just staying on this topic of tech, some of the things we're wrestling with right now is the fact that, you have 5G and 10G coming in before too much longer. And they're going to be dependent upon, particularly the 10G is going to be dependent upon these repeater cells being installed. And they're not necessarily an issue because there's actually one down at Panorama right now in front of the bank at Panorama. You would never even know what it is. It just looks like it's another telephone pole. But we've been wrestling with companies that want to put up 120-foot towers between the curb and the sidewalk in some of these
Calling them
locations.
micro.
Calling them micro towers, which we know they're not. So we're going to have to wrestle with that. We've been
Compared to
waiting
the
for.
other.
City of Rochester just enacted a new telecommunications ordinance, which we're reviewing to see how that might benefit us in being able to mitigate and minimize any of these types of high towers, especially adjacent to the right of way. It's never a good thing, I don't think. Especially since we have utilities underneath those areas. So, but that's just another thing that we have to look at as we go through the process.
So 5G is already out there, though, that uses the existing cell tower technology?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah. It's all driven by data now. I mean, everything used to be just a phone call. It's not a phone call anymore.
I'm old enough to remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
Believe me.
Did anyone have any other questions on this plan before we move on?
I heard you mention those two, but I didn't hear the biggest one, the Morgan's plan. Is that dead now?
No, it's
Oh,
not.
no. We can go to it if you'd like to see it.
We can show you what was reviewed at sketch plan.
400.
They're currently in their final design phases right now. They'll be coming back with the application for the planning board to hear again. So they went through sketch and then they said, all right, now we got to go do all the fine detail engineering work that they hadn't done yet. So in the process of that, but I'll pull it up in a second here for you.
I say we did an early on highlight
Right next
when we
to-
first started. We just didn't have any updated new plans to share, but we can show you what's.
Home business better down the road.
Wait, 250.
Yeah.
It's at the north. This is at the northwest quadrant of Atlantic 250. So next to the gun club here.
This is the latest one.
Sketch.
Yeah, other gas stations
That it?
in the other corner.
Yeah,
Across the street,
all my
across the
letters.
street, the empty houses,
Yeah.
and then looking all the way down to Penfield Center.
That's a lot of fun.
No, it won't. Well, it won't be if they approve this.
Gotcha.
So Atlantic is on our left.
This is the people next house, is that what you're saying?
Atlantic's on our left. Penfield Center's on the right. 250's here in the middle. And this was the latest plan that we had that was reviewed at sketch plan for a mix of single-family detached, duplex, triplex, fourplex, a few apartment buildings that are 3 stories with underground parking, and a new central village with vertical mixed use that has commercial retail on the ground floor and townhomes, rental residential space on the second floor above them.
Underground parking, you said?
On these apartment units, they'll be able to use the ground floor as parking because the way
I know that the distance to bedrock is pretty shallow there if you're gonna.
Well, it's similar to what they did.
they've done their geotech.
Park Boulevard.
They've done their
something like
geotech, so they were able to figure that out as they designed this layout. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing this if they didn't know where that bedrock was yet.
And ironically, going back to Donna's comment, they were actually looking to do a 40,000 or bigger square foot building.
Oh God, that was 60, I think.
And they wanted to use that for office. I'm suspecting they wanted to use it for medical office space. But that ordinance does not allow, for this district, does not allow big box development like that. So they had to break it down. So we've got
So
small.
are there
ones.
units on the other side of 250 as well?
Yes.
That's a future phase. It's about a
750.
well, I'm talking about the number of years to build it out, probably
Oh, at least
7 to 10
7 years. Yeah.
We talked about,
This
we
way,
talked
this
about
keeps-
running that sanitary sewer for, what,
That's gonna be
2 miles?
My next question is that,
Yeah, it's got quite a run to do the sanitary sewer.
Can you pull up the town map?
But they can phase their, they
Oh,
can
that's
phase that
perfect, yeah.
section.
Hang on, let me get a different
That's
one.
right.
I had that one ready for something else.
For the east side of the road, yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's all phased.
They've got to build the force main and the trunk line. They'll actually pump from there over to here in front of the town hall, and then it runs
Can you just kind of run
south
down
from here.
the street
Yeah,
there?
one second. Before we leave that, I just wanted to show you guys some of the renderings that they also showed the planning board of what that built product would look like. So, well, it's dark.
And this is for profit, there's no.
Do you have
Yeah.
any pictures of the farmland that's there now that we're
They
using off of?
you can show that, yeah. I mean, I think we all know what it looks like. But these
So
are,
when something like this gets submitted, traffic patterns, impact on schools, all that, I assume is taken into consideration and.
Yep.
We're actually looking at this as probably becoming a retirement village more than having children. There will be children there, obviously, there always
I
are.
would say it's a mix of
You have younger people.
young professionals who are either just starting their family, just getting married, or on their own, or people who are downsizing.
so these are the smaller units then?
Yeah,
It's a
it's-
combination.
This streetscape shows a mix of the fourplex units, where you have a split in the middle here, a unit here, and a unit on its left. In the background is the 3-story apartment, and then everything else is connected through green space and walkability. What was I going to show?
School district is one of the groups that, we thought to bring into this group is who we have on our list to come in and talk about what are their future plans. I mean, the school district owns property out on Harris Road. So they're planning for future build out of the town. So the school district, buys property. They have property on Atlantic Avenue. They're looking at property on Park Road. So the school district has future plans to continue to grow as the town continues to grow. And that's one of the groups, we thought, to bring them in and, you could have questions of them and see what their plans are and how they envision.
So if
You
you're
know,
looking
and-
at, kind of tying it into the new plan that we're working on, I know you guys were talking a little about sustainability. I've read some interesting stuff where the builders are putting in geothermal infrastructure in. That subdivision seems like it might be an ideal
It's becoming very popular.
opportunity to at least get the piping in the ground while they're putting the site work in.
Very much
And then, the town takes that over, sells the energy back to the people there, and town's making some money.
We've had a couple people this year put their homes on.
Well, because they can put the plastic in the ground where they're doing the site work for relatively little money, and then,
Yeah, we look at that in terms of, whenever we're doing utility installation, we're always looking at that as an option.
We also work with developers for electric car charging stations and spots you can plug in or at least run the conduit.
well,
so
then
it's in the
then
future.
each individual.
Guys, we gotta have one conversation at a time with these microphones, otherwise it gets blurry when we do
You can
recording.
ask him to ask the question, and he just asked me, so.
If you
No,
could
I know,
just
Mark
show,
was just
if you could
saying
just show
something.
where the sanitary sewer is going to be run, to give them an idea of what has to be done here.
Sure.
May I ask a question while we're pulling this up? So the developer ended up essentially paying the cost of getting that sewer connected into the existing line. But there is presumably maintenance and costs associated with that going forward ad infinitum.
Yes, everybody in Penfield who's on sanitary sewer pays an operation and maintenance charge. The developers always pay for the sewers themselves, starting out. As time goes on, everybody's in the district, so those people will also be paying for the operation and maintenance, as we all do now. So your sewers aren't that old, but for my sewers will be older. So the older the sewer gets, the more likelihood there's going to be a need for repairs and replacement at some point in time. So it's kind of like builds itself out. Sewers are generally good for what, 50, 75 years maybe? before they start to shut. The older sewers, that's not true, because they used to use transite clay pipe, which is not very sustainable. But now with the plastics that they're using, they can last for a long, long time without a lot of maintenance. The big issue for maintenance for us is keeping them clean, flushing them out, which we do constantly. I can't remember how many miles of sewer they flushed out last year. I couldn't believe how many it was, but it was in the hundreds, I think. So, yeah, everybody's responsible for helping to pay for the sewer maintenance charges. And that's even true, going back to your comment, for like the other group there that's not for profit. Even if they don't pay their taxes, land taxes, they still have to pay district charges. They have to pay for the sanitary services and all that business. They're never let out of that. So.
Right, but that's a profit for the town, right?
I don't know if it's a profit. It's just something that has to be done.
I don't remember which plan it was, said that, I think it was 30%, 30 cents on the dollar. You guys charge, it costs to have vacant land or what you're saying, non-tax land. And then if it's developed, it's 60 cents profit to the town for that?
Well, single-family homes, vacant land doesn't really cost anything because you're not providing any services to it.
Right.
Residential lands cost more because you're kind of hoping to break even because you build a house. If the house is $1 million house and you're getting a lot of taxes off of a $1 million house, that's helpful. But if you're building $250,000 houses and you're having to pave and plow a half a mile of road, it kind of balances out where you're not really making any
Your
money.
break even is what was it?
You're hoping to break
15
even
or something for a house sales?
Well, the rule, I think, rule of thumb was if it was $350,000, you were breaking even if you had 2 children in the school district, something like that. But, yeah, development costs money.
But the 2010 plan called for more affordable housing for young families to come in. Is that 350,000 level? Is that for some home
Not
buyers?
really. I mean, right now, we went through a little bit of a boom in Penfield because you had a lot of millennials coming in to buy for possibly the first time, or they had a house maybe in the city that they sold and now they're coming out here. The housing that went for up to like, I'd say 200,000 was very, very popular. You couldn't find a house. I mean, you noticed that the signs didn't even go up for more than a day and they were gone.
But Ryan's track there on 5 Mile Line.
Those are
350
expensive
400,
houses.
right? But how does
Ryan
that-
homes are expensive homes. Those houses are all starting out at $285, something like that, but they can go up to like $420,000.
Windsor Ridge, they've
So
been,
where is the emphasis coming from the 2010 plan to attract families and first-time home buyers in the Penfield? Where are they gonna buy?
Well, that's a good question because realistically what's happening is the land values have become so expensive. It's hard to justify building a $145,000 home or $150,000 home when the land's costing you more than what you're going to get back from it when you put a $150,000.
But it was important to someone in 2010, and I'm assuming that demographics were projecting forward, that that's where Penfield's gonna grow.
That's where this mixed use, plans like this mixed use project came in. It gives you the ability to offer a smaller footprint, even though it's rental. You're not paying as much as you would for that first time house because everything that's getting built right now has to be at that higher price range
Right.
for a developer to make any sort of profit on the project. So now you come in with a different form of housing, an alternate housing style, which is part of the plan's recommendation. That gives people the ability, all right, do I want to go for new construction, although it's rental, new construction in a townhome? Or do I want to look at something that just came on the market that's a part of someone's downsizing as a pre-owned home?
But I didn't hear you say that the new ones they're building were gonna be assisted or subsidized at all, so I'm assuming it's market rate.
The home leasing project by the Y?
Yeah.
Yeah, the independent living will be marketed towards seniors, and that's all market rate. And then the back half is the assisted living and memory care.
Okay, so my question still is from 2010, where are these first-time Penfield home buyers gonna buy?
Well, right now, it's, as Jim said, it's in anyone who's
they're
downsizing,
buying existing
they're
stock.
buying pre-owned homes.
Okay.
There are some who happen to have
But
money.
I don't wanna belabor the point, but if the 2010 plan said that was gonna be a huge need, how are we doing, what are we providing for that? We're not doing anything.
But we can only do so much. We have to work with the developers who come in and go on the existing zoning. It wasn't until, last year? No, November 2017 that we had mixed use available as a zoning option. So
That's-
from 2010 to 2017, all we had was basic residential, and the most recent thing that happened during that time was the apartments down at South Point Cove at Water's Edge and Ellison Heights. So in terms of alternate styles of housing, those came in. Everything else was single-family detached or some townhomes. It still cost a lot of money to build and to buy. So what we saw, as Jim said, was pre-owned homes going on the market, real hot sales, everything going quick. That's when first-time home buyers were coming in the last few years to just buy these things up left and right. That's where we see them going.
Yeah, a lot of it too is trying to keep, the Rothfuss kids staying in town instead of moving out and having to go somewhere else because they can't even afford an apartment here. It's trying to keep people here that grew up here.
They won't have much to do if we keep on developing their farmland, so.
Well, we're not developing hers. Unfortunately for you, we're not. But the thing is, and you hit it on the head, is the big problem we're running into is the land value is so expensive. Because they're really, right now, there's not that much development going on in Penfield compared to what was going on in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We have about 3 developers right now that are kind of building out what they already have. And you have Ryan constantly looking for land, but they're not that successful because we don't have that many sanitary sewers available, as we talked about in one of our last discussions. So right now, there's a real need for younger housing to allow people to come in affordability-wise, but it's just not there. As a matter of fact, you're also going to talk,
Why aren't we pushing that instead of pushing developing mixed-use districts then?
Where else would you put them?
I don't know, that's why we're here.
Because as I said, if you were to take, even, you look at Ryan builds on small lots. Nobody builds on lots as small as Ryan does, but even those lots being as small as they are, they can't justify building anything under than $250,000 to $300,000 houses on those lots.
So the issue here is being able to have the contractors and come in and actually, they're not gonna build something they can't sell.
You have to buy the
profitable.
property at a high rate. The property is very expensive here. The utility installation and the road work and all the site work that has to be done is very expensive. And then now you have to justify being able to pay for all that off, and how do you do it? Well, the lots that Ryan buys usually are about $60,000 a lot just for the lot itself. Now you gotta put a house on it that justifies the value and the cost of what you're putting into the property.
And on the flip side of that, if you don't go that route where sanitary sewers become available, if you go into the 1 and 2 acre zoning districts to build a new house basically that's on septic, now you're buying a lot more land, you're still getting taxed on it, you're getting taxed on the house. So no matter what you do, there really isn't an inexpensive option right now based on what's out there.
But that's something.
So the need is still there, the
need is
2010,
there.
the need is there, it's just the available options in order to generate the housing is not.
But that's something this group can look at. I mean, you can look at, we have an R112 zoning district. We have MR zoning districts. Maybe that's something you need to look at, is rezoning areas for smaller lots so you could build smaller houses on them. Rezoning for a multi-residential zoning. We have 0 MR property left in this town. Everything's built out.
And there's not that much to begin with.
We get calls every day with.
This property like the office park you're doing down at Panorama, would that allow an 8-10-story high-rise apartment building to be in there? I mean, maybe that's.
No, not behind there. It's not zoned for that. It was originally zoned to allow for commercial manufacturing. That's what it was really designed to be.
But an
back in
area
the
such
80s.
as that's already developed.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier. That is probably not a use that's very, desirable at this point in time, just because the market's not there for it, and it's just not big enough at this point in time to really develop anything that would generate any value to any commercial operator.
But I think the mixed, I think that what we're seeing, what we just saw in terms of the Morgan development, we saw just in terms of the sketch plan, that type of environment where that there's a mix of rental and things that can be owned, where they are either.
Morgan was all rentals.
Pardon?
Morgan's all rentals.
Yeah, that's all rental.
It's all rental.
Yes.
But there are lots of mixed-use types of developments that have a mixture of some rental, and then they've got owned properties, either small independent freestanding houses or row houses, condos, that sort of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
No, I agree, but that's
Which-
not what we're building.
Pardon?
That's not what we're building now.
No, but
That's what's coming in.
Well, that's what's being built there.
but that's what's.
Yeah,
I think
you're
that's
right.
the direction things are going, and that's what we have to think about. I believe if we're going to think about attracting younger people and also having homes for people who want to downsize and don't want to take care of the property and that sort of stuff, and And in some ways, what would be great is that then that's a real sort of a nice mix of people in the community, and not just the big houses with the people with a lot of kids and little houses where the older people live or whatever. It would kind of make for a nice community mix to have more settings like
No, I
that.
agree, but if the rents are assisted or subsidized, it's gonna be market rate rents, and somebody moving into Penfield, I don't see how they'd be able to afford it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see where the rent levels are based on, can we talk to what we, on the list, since we're adding people to the list? I'd love to talk to one or two of the developers to walk us through the process of what they would recommend to help bring affordable housing. What could they do for us?
That's,
We can at least ask the question,
short
right?
list is, we can bring in a developer, what does it cost to get a letter of credit? What is the construction cost? I mean, we require sidewalks in Penfield, we require, a lot of other things that make it nice, but obviously those drive up costs. We require landscaping on each lot, we require a lot of things, so before you even get into building a building, you've already bought the lot cost at whatever the rate is, you've now installed sidewalks on all your frontages internally, pathways, you've installed street lighting, you've installed other stuff, so it makes it a nice neighborhood, but, you're already raising up what that bar is, but it might be nice to hear from a developer to
Yeah,
say,
because if they
here's
said,
what
okay,
we've
well,
got, and-
here's a couple of options from a zoning perspective that would allow us to be able to,
Yeah, if there was
because the
land-
group look at those and maybe include them in recommendations.
It's a good recommendation. We should do that.
So with a plan like this, where this is all slated to be rentals, can the town mandate that a portion of it, the townhouse component, has to be available to own?
No.
you can rent your house. I don't know where you live, but you can rent your house out as a rental. There's no dictation through the state where we can mandate your house cannot be a rental, your house can't be a rental.
We're
That's
starting to see a lot of houses actually with a for lease sign on it that were once single-family homes that people have paid off, and they're either moving somewhere else, downsizing, but
The interesting
they
thing
want to
also,
sell that house.
the interesting thing also that we're knowing is we're having some problems, as is every town in the country, with foreclosures. The rental properties are being better maintained in most cases than the privately owned properties, especially if you're going into foreclosure, because you're getting minimal coverage on your properties. The bank or lending institution will cut the grass for you or something else. But generally speaking, when you have these large operations like Morgan's, and there are others, they do a good job of taking care of their property. As a matter of fact, we've been to most of the Morgan sites in this area. They're all meticulously maintained on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes the look from the street's better than who's owning it versus who's renting it. This is going to take a while to build out, but I think it's going to end up being a very popular development before it's done, because it will have a lot of amenities for seniors. There'll be a lot of walkability. There'll be a lot of park space. There's going to be some commercial development that will serve the needs of the people within that area. So I think it's going to be a nice project when they get it done. It's going to take quite a while for it to happen, though. Especially if the interest rates start jumping again.
Yep.
Zone A, is that the gas station?
Yes,
the
that
empty gas station that was leveled just recently.
Oh,
gas
Don Scott's
station.
on here.
Don Scott's is on the other
And that
corner.
property just last week received its sign-offs from the DEC for completion of a contamination process, anti-contamination process.
The one that's marked zone A.
Yeah, the remediation process was.
That was the one.
So is that,
Little gas
and that's, so they've taken that out, they're gonna remediate the
Well,
property.
they don't,
Any
they
idea
don't
what they're gonna
own
put
that.
in there?
That's owned by somebody else. So we're going to work with that somebody else to see if he's gonna develop it or sell it. But whatever happens, it'll have to somehow be incorporated into that, so.
That's why you
you can
see
gain
this kind of
access to
stub
it.
here with the circle there. Gives them the ability to tie in here.
If they can purchase the property, yeah.
Well, whoever
Well, even so,
develops
it gives them the
it will require
connection
cross
point.
access, and
So it's
That
still
way-
open, right? That, they don't know what.
they don't know what they're doing with it yet. I'm not even sure the developer, or the owner wants to develop it or if he wants to sell it. I'm not sure what's gonna happen there.
This is the Don Scott's gas station.
Has that been sold yet?
Yes.
Yes, it's been sold. There's a gentleman coming in to the next zoning board meeting to ask for a permit to continue the use. I think he eventually wants to tear it down and rebuild something new there, but he wants to.
Same thing along the same lines, gas station.
There will not be any service there. It'll just be a convenience mart and gasoline service. He's also taking over the one at 441 and 250, the old mobile station down there. And he's also taking over the one at Panorama Plaza, the old Hess gas station. It's a group called Quicklies. probably haven't seen them around, there aren't many of them, but it's a family-owned business.
I think you have on, they're kind of working their way up this way. They've got a
If you go
couple of
down, if you get off of 390 South at Route 15 on your way to the Lakeville, there's a big complex right there, and they're in that complex.
Is Penfield 9 Mile gonna go to 2 lanes?
No.
Or 4 lanes essentially?
No.
No,
the carrying capacity on that road's pretty good. It's actually quite
there
good.
may be turn lanes for this, like a turn in or out, like a center line. They may have to widen it in a section so you
So
have
like they
a,
did with the Y.
They could
you'd have
deceleration lane.
a turning pocket in the middle dedicated to it, but not looking at, and there may be signal timing going down the road. They've looked at all the way
down to
from
Wayland.
Plank down to Wayland Road, that you have to do signal timing between those and synchronize the lights. But again, this was sketch plan. We haven't seen preliminary final plans yet. They've got to come back with their full-blown traffic study. They've got to come back with, drainage. They got to come back with calcs for the pump station, everything else. So this is, again, still a concept at this point. This is not an approved project.
So you don't know when they would break ground?
No.
Not there yet?
Not soon.
Sorry, sure. Whoa.
Not soon.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what we gonna say.
I like Harley. Cherry trees.
Anything else? Any other questions?
That's all rental?
Yep.
That one too?
Yeah.
Audience question?
So we didn't show you where it was gonna go, did we? So if you were to start at their property,
Which part are you talking
I
about?
wanna go down to the sanitary line.
Oh, so here's their property here.
So if you go right to the Ann Avenue is probably where the sewer's gonna come in. They have to run it all the way down there, stop, then go south. Keep going. No. No, you gotta go down to, you're gonna have to go down to, Coachman.
I gotta keep going.
No, go back. Now go down, keep going,
That's
stop.
where it flows.
It's gotta go in there and then through there. They have to rebuild that sewer, basically.
Well, parts of it.
This part.
Well, it's a
The
lot of
impact
sewer.
to the current residents that are using that sewer.
No.
It'll make it better for them.
There's, within the wetland area, so the wetland area along the Hip Brook area, there's sections of the sanitary sewer that were either laid flat or actually inverted. They're back pitched the wrong way, so we've got some restrictions within the wetland. So they've got to get permitting to build a parallel sewer within that area at a positive slope, so that gains them more flow capacity. That's actually a betterment or improvement to the existing neighborhood. Once the parallel sewer is constructed, they would then cut over from the existing over. So if you're a resident in the area, you don't notice anything. The toilet flush is the same as it does all the time. There's no stoppage of use. They've obviously still got to get all that permitting from the DEC. They've got to coordinate, the work through that area. They haven't gotten to that part yet. So there's still a lot
A lot to do, yeah.
of stuff to get through.
We'll all be old enough to move there when the time comes.
I'm probably already there.
Let's talk about some of the requests we've had for rezoning. Jim, I don't know if you've kind of got a lot of these.
Well, people are obviously aware of what your task is, and every time we have one of these, people come to us and say, we'd like the committee to consider looking at our property for a recommendation to the town board for potential rezoning. We don't say that that's a good idea or that's a bad idea. We say we're going to let the committee look at it and make a determination on their own. You may or may not get what you're looking for, but we can certainly bring it to them to let them look at it. We have a few. We'll probably get more that we usually do. And you also have to go back and kind of look at the 2010 plan, because one of the areas that the 2010 plan, can we go to Jackson and Blank? And this is just for your reference to go back and read before we get into this too deeply, but one of the recommendations by the last comprehensive plan update committee was to look at higher densities north of Plank Road by Jackson Road, only because there was the capacity for sewer installation in that neighborhood at that time, or it was anticipated to happen at that time. So they were recommending that a higher density, they didn't say what it was, but they said a higher density other than the 1 acre zoning and the 2 acre zoning in that neighborhood. As we talked about before, there's an issue right now with Webster that they have not solved their capacity issues for Penfield, and they need $11 million to do that. So it's going to be a while before that happens, but it's something to keep in the back of your minds as to whether or not we should be discussing continuing on with that recommendation or changing that recommendation, that's gonna be up to you based on what we hear with the sewer capacity issues from our DPW people. But some of the ones that have come in, and I've been talking to other groups too,
Well, Jackson blankly
We're-
request for the Lupo property. Zach's
Yeah.
got the hand on it right now.
do you wanna, can you bring that up?
Plan?
Yeah. Well, maybe it's not even worth it this way, so.
We have some work to do on that.
It's so remedial and it's not probably worth it, but on the corner, on the southeast corner of Plank and Jackson, a family by the name of Lupo owns that property, and then just south of that is property owned by the Rubino family. They've had that property for all the years I've been here. There's a proposal right now to develop, I think, 74 lots on that property, on those two
On both.
properties. And the question really is, we're wrestling with right now is, should that be zoned differently than it is? It's zoned 1 acre right now. Should it be zoned differently or should it stay as it is? They currently right now are going to run a sanitary sewer down Plank Road to Shoecraft Road to serve the site. They're complaining because they're saying that it's going to cost them more to run the sewer than what they're going to get out of the number of units to put it in. So they're looking at alternative designs as to how to get sanitary sewage to Shoecraft Road. So that's one of the sites we'll be looking at when we take our tour. Just to kind of keep that in the back of your minds as you're looking at that. The
That's
next-
not tied to the Webster limitation, is it?
No.
No, because it's supposed to be going into the interceptor
Pumping
system.
west. We have sanitary sewer at the corner of Shoecraft and Plank Road that heads straight west down Plank and then ties into the county interceptor sewer, so it doesn't go north into Webster.
Okay.
Webster's got some capacity issues, so they're still working on their treatment plant, so kind of on that north end of town, would go that way, but here they're going west, and that kind of bypasses Webster and goes into the county and goes to Van Layer and gets treated by the county.
Zach, why don't we go over
So-
towards Creek and Plank in that area?
It's currently zoned RR1,
Okay,
so it's a rural residential, 1 acre is our zoning for
and they're
that.
looking for the half-acre zoning, is that the idea?
They've requested something less than that.
Less than
1 acre.
No,
Less than 1
less
acre.
than 1 acre, sorry.
Oh, less
Not-
than 1 acre.
Yeah, less than 1 acre.
There's something similar to the half-acre zoning,
Right.
but
Did they
no
say what the
rezoning
break-even
would take
point was
place
for them?
until
for
this
units?
committee's done.
Okay, no,
Well,
but
it
I mean,
depends on what much they have to spend on utilities. And right now, they're looking, if they did what we would normally do with an 8-inch line, they'd have to put in an 8-inch gravity system with a pump station to accommodate, to get everything to go down to Shoecraft. That would cost, I don't know,
A chunk of money.
400,000 maybe?
Well, yes, what I'm saying is that if they're asking to rezone that to smaller lots, in other words, they must know what the break-even number of units is.
Oh, they do.
So have they shared that so that when we're talking about what we might recommend
Well-
size-wise for the lots, we know what they would need?
Not at this point, because there's alternative sewer solutions that don't require
As much.
as large of a system, under a low-pressure force main sewer, where it's a smaller pipe, and each house has its own little private grinder pump on it, which gets sent to another pump out at the road, and then
Yeah,
under,
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
so that goes
So,
down,
one
so
of the
that goes
com-
down the road to a point of gravity, and then eventually to Shoecraft. So it is an alternative that they would propose with the layout of the 74 houses, give or take, that zoning allows today.
So the complication here though, George, is the fact that they are already moving forward on a plan for 74 units. So if they're going to do that, the question really is it worth the effort of looking at this for a rezoning? Or
Well,
just
no, that's-
keeping it
that's
as
the
to what it
question.
is?
Well, I'm taking a look at the other lots that are around it, so I think a trip out there to see kind of the feel of the area, because if you don't
No
want to drop a
question.
neighborhood with half-acre lots out there, it's...
Well, that's as Zach said
So-
earlier, it's called spot zoning. If we pick just, like Michael, so, we're gonna zone his property a higher density just to benefit him, you need to look regionally at the area.
That's what I'm thinking
How
about.
it
the
ties
rest.
in, what the other stuff around it is, what's the neighborhood look like. That's what you look for a rezoning. You can't just say,
Because you've got some- I
hey,
see
you're a nice guy, we'll give you a higher density in the middle of nowhere and just,
Rezone your
See,
property.
but I can see around there, you've got some smaller lots already there.
These,
So I've already done some of that.
So,
Right.
but yeah, you need to look at it, you know.
But I'm saying,
Well,
I can see already, if you scroll down with it, there's already been some obvious zoning of smaller lots.
Yeah, and that's a
Well-
good point. We talked about pre-existing nonconformance, which
Yeah.
occurs all over Penfield and every other town in America. But there are properties out in East Penfield, and actually this is why, back in the 1970s and early 80s, why the town board rezoned to 1 and 2 acres, is because all these little lots out there where houses are existing were all having a little bit of problem with septic, and everybody's backyard turned into one gigantic leach field. And they said, we can't do this anymore. We've got to spread these people out until such time as there's sanitary sewers. Well, that was back in 1978, and there haven't been sanitary sewers out there yet. So you can see there are little pockets all
Now
over
we're
Penfield like
finally
that.
starting to see sewers as each development grows. We have them bring it to their property lines, so sewers are slowly making their way to this area.
Yeah, it's organic, I get but I'm just saying, once we go out there, because I haven't spent a lot of time in that area, and I'm gonna go out now.
Just
Yeah.
to give you a reference, this one that I'm highlighting here, Weybridge Court, these are newer homes that were built off Jackson. They're just south of the mega mansion that was built here. These are all on lots that are slightly larger than 1 acre. So just to give you an idea, because they provided a plan that complied with zoning for the 11 lots that are built there. And then if we go up Jackson Road and we see these crosshatch areas, these were developed under cluster zoning. So same idea, they come up with a smaller lot, but there's a lot of leftover space. So it's less road, less infrastructure and utilities when they do it, but they still had to come up with a number of lots that would have complied under 1 acre zoning. They didn't squeeze in more than what the code would originally allow. It's just a different configuration of those lots. So when you are out exploring and you see what looks like half-acre lots, some of them might be, but that's because they were rearranged to be a smaller lot size, and there was residual acreage left over from that project.
And right where his cursor is, there's a gigantic pond there which took up that extra space where houses would have gone if they were half-acre lots instead of acre lots.
Gotcha.
Another one,
Yeah, here it is. Just from an
Yeah.
aerial point of view, you can kind of see how things are rearranged in there this was turned into a drainage area rather than houses. But it was part of the overall project originally.
why don't we jump down to Creek and Plank in that area down there. Another area that we've been watching for a couple of years. This is kind of similar to what happened at the area on Penfield Road across from Wegmans. We had a whole bunch of houses right in front of the school, in the park, and they couldn't sell them for a reasonable cost, a reasonable rate. We're looking, my initial reaction was I was looking at the ones along Creek Street as you go from Plank up to Empire. I get nervous though because you don't want to have if you do something on this side of the street which has got commercial abutting it on the back, if you change that zoning to something like limited business,
Or BNR.
well, even BNR, I mean, yes, you could have office space there, but now you got the houses on the other side of the street which are still fairly in great shape. They're well maintained by the property owners. But you're getting a lot of traffic there. You got to kind of wrestle out. We're going to have to go look at that area and see what you think because it's becoming kind of an issue. The other ones that might even be worse is this one here on Plank Road. There's a lot of traffic on Plank Road now. Some of the properties on Plank, you see they're LB. The other properties in the gray are single-family residential up to Creek Street. And then you've got the Dayton's Corner School there on the corner. That's something we should look at as potential for maybe business non-retail or even limited business. Just because it could be a good buffer with the school there on the south and the corner lot on Creek Street. We're gonna have to go look at it and see what you think.
It becomes it's similar to what we saw on Penfield Road. It becomes a less desirable place to have a single-family home
And I hate to
on
do
a
this to
road
you.
that becomes so heavily traveled.
I hate to do
throughout
it,
the
but I'd
daytime.
take you out during the peak period to take a look at it because it
All
is
you gotta
kind
do
of.
is go to lunch one
it's
day, go down that
miserable.
road.
So it's something to look at there. You had talked a little bit. I want to go up Bay Road a little bit too. Bay, right there on the corner of Bay, as you see where it's yellow now, and it goes gray. Gentleman owns those 3 lots. At 1181, there is a business there. I believe it's a hair salon. The next 3 lots are along the street. There are kind of small lots. They're owned by the same person, excuse me. And he's interested in possibly doing something like a transitional zoning like townhouse to take it from commercial into single family, and that his property would be the transition possibly with townhouse development. So that's something we'd have to look at as well. Excuse me. Yeah, if we can go down to Empire Boulevard. There's a piece of property on Empire Boulevard. It's an awkward situation. Well, there's two actually. Stay right there. See where it's R112 up there? That's the old Hilltop Farm Market. It's zoned for single-family residential. It's probably not a good place for single-family residential as you're coming up that hill. That's one I want you to look at and maybe come up with a recommendation as to what you think it might be other than single-family residential, because I don't see anybody possibly building. They might build townhouses there, I'm not sure, but I don't see them building single-family detached housing for ownership on that site. The other one that's kind of interesting is down the hill a little bit further. Some of you might recall, Roland, maybe you'll recall, years ago, that was owned by a guy by the name of Nori Sabunko of Nori Construction. And he donated that land to the Turkish Society of Rochester at one time for them to build a new mosque on. And they actually went through the process and they got it approved. But it wasn't built there. It was relocated out to Gates, I believe. It's over on BN Road now. But in any event, there's been some interest in the property over the last several years. The problem is it's cut in half. The front portion is zoned for LaSalle's Landing, which is kind of a mixed-use type zone. The back portion is still R120. And I don't know if you really can develop both of them on that property, because there's not a lot of density with the R120 for the amount of work you'd have to bring in utilities and everything else to serve the site. The question I'm going to ask you to look at is whether or not that portion of 1423 should stay as R120 or should be zoned as LaSalle's Landing to keep it all in one zone.
Jim, could you explain the history of why this line was drawn here rather than matching the
It's a
parcel
gore
lines?
line that comes down. It was to follow the back sides of the properties that were developed here along the street. There is a change in grade from that property up to where Morning Woods Lane and also Mance Lane are. It's quite a bit lower than those properties. And I'm not suggesting that they do anything of a commercial nature, because I don't want to see that next to a residential setting. But they might be able to do some type of mixed residential use like townhouses or something of that nature.
And my point with that is, when we rezoned for mixed use, we had to toss up the idea of, do we just go X amount of feet back from 250 and call that the zoning district, or do we follow the property lines? And it's examples like this is what made us say, let's go with the property lines to avoid situations like this, where you're really hurting the property by splitting the zoning the way it does, because you're really kind of left with, what am I supposed to do with this project? I have two uses and only one frontage, and I can't get one through the other. So we've been trying to avoid situations like this as we go through other rezoning applications.
It's kind of what happened next door. You've all heard of the term use variance, where you put something on a property that's not really zoned for that. That doesn't happen very often. I've been here for almost 40 years now, and it's only happened one time. And it happened on that property where it says R120, because the first 500 feet in off of Empire Boulevard at one time is zoned commercial. And up till 1980, commercial meant you could do anything you wanted of a commercial or industrial nature on the property, which they did. But then you had this beautiful piece of property in the back. There's actually a 90-foot waterfall at the back of that property, which would have been a beautiful setting for single-family residential at one time, but you now have to drive through an industrial complex to get to it. So they came in and asked for a use variance because they knew they could never build single-family homes back there. And the board, recognizing the concern the neighbors had, the neighbors are all around that area, they wanted to keep it a low-intensity use. They gave them a use variance to construct mini storage warehousing. There was a need for mini storage warehousing. It's a quiet use, and they got the variance for that. They're the only ones that have ever gotten one out of all the people that have ever asked. So there was some rationale for that. And what it's doing is basically kind of cleaning up what was an old industrial site now. And it's kind of being converted into a storage warehousing facility, which is kind of a clean operation compared to what was there years ago. So you gotta kind of take all that stuff into account as you go through all this. Do we have any other one?
Low income?
Yeah, I've been talking to some people at St. Joseph's Church. There's a committee at the church who are looking at opportunities for low-income housing for people that are in need of housing. They're doing it in Penfield. There's other towns where they're doing it in other towns for other congregations who do it in other towns. There was a letter came out. Did the group get the letters?
I put it in the Google Drive today.
Okay, so the letter's in there for you to review. But there's a group looking to see if you will look for opportunities for low-income housing to accommodate that segment of society in Penfield. Again, the big problem is, where is the land that's going to be affordable enough to do it? And certainly, it's either going to be a situation where somebody's going to want to make a profit for the development purpose, or it's going to be a not-for-profit operation. And I don't know who would build that. Certainly, the church can't do that. They don't have the wherewithal to do that kind of a thing. So, I want you to take a look at the letter, though, see what you think, and then we'll discuss all these things as time goes on here.
Is there any requirement for the town to have a certain amount of low-income housing available?
Not really, but you can be taken to task, obviously, for not having any. We do have some. We have the mobile home park, which has 800 units, which is considered to be affordable housing. That's the term you want to use, affordable housing. We did at one time have Pembroke Meadows, which is now not affordable housing anymore. It's market rate housing, but for 35 years it was affordable housing. We currently have Crown Oak Estates, which is over next to Wegmans on Penfield Road. That is Section 8 housing, so that meets that need. But there isn't much more than that here. And it just goes down to, that's a for-profit organization too that built that. That was Reynolds Aluminum actually built that company, or built that complex. So that was for-profit on their part. But there isn't that much out there that really accommodates that need. But I suspect that's probably true of most of the suburbs in Monroe County. Certainly on the east side of Monroe County, there's not a lot there. It's just too expensive to build here, is what it comes down to. But I want you to take a look at the letter, get a feel for it, and we'll talk about that in more detail at a later meeting.
So those are the requests we've received so far. As they will probably get more and share them with the group. We've got areas that, obviously we've highlighted that we've got questions of how is that going to transition? Is it zoned properly? What's the future of those lands? Obviously, the golf course comes to mind. As we look ahead, we're dealing with Shadow Pines now. Obviously, we've got to look at what's the future for Shadow Lake, what's the future for Penfield Country Club. We'll have to look at those properties. We've got, what's up with Big Oak. That's a single-family zoned area right now. Portion of it is in Penfield, so we've got other areas we can kind of go through of spots we've got questioned about and like your input on or to take a look at, and we can highlight those.
And I think George makes a good comment. You really need to go out and see these properties and kind of sit there and look at them for a while, just versus driving by them and figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, and as the weather gets nicer, we can get a rec van and drive around if you want. We can do it, in the afternoon or something to go look at them. Obviously, you're always welcome to go on your own as we start to highlight them, and then you guys will have areas you want to look at it as well. Our next item is to talk about who do you want to bring in as guests in the future.
So I've made a list of ones that are, like, to me, that popped out, and I made copies, so do you mind if I just kind of pass these
Sure,
out?
sure, ahead. Great.
Because I think that there might be a lot of overlap between what we might be thinking, so I just thought, as I was going through the plan,
That's a good comment about the mass transit situation, because there is some activity taking place on that.
Everybody had a chance to read Donna's list? Does that spur who you want to bring in, or thoughts, or obviously other people have been thinking about it?
I was wondering, just as I'm thinking about the mixed use that you guys are bringing in, part of that success of that involves the businesses thriving, which we haven't had a lot of. I mean, I know when we first met, you guys talked about how it could be hardware stores, could be, you know, whatever, but those don't seem to last a long time in town. One of my
Well, yeah,
neighbors-
they can't be something that's gonna directly compete with a Lowe's or Home Depot.
One of my farmer neighbors was talking to me about what does the town have to enable these businesses to sustain themselves. I mean, like the county has some tax abatements, and I don't know, town probably does some in-kind services or whatever to get them in there and started. But there's really not a lot to keep them sustaining.
Well, they have to keep
As-
them self-sustaining.
Right.
They have to have a market, and if you don't have a market,
I
you're not gonna
understand,
do
I understand it, but we want to develop that market, right? You want to encourage businesses to come in and
Well, certainly, you know,
occupy those mixed-use businesses, so.
absolutely.
Let me-
But you've gotta have businesses that are going to, number one, wanna be here.
Well, let me get to my question, because that was part of it. Is there someone, I don't know, I know they don't call the county program Comida anymore, it's whatever, it's a
Right.
Upland Road.
Right.
That has experience with economic development and sustaining economic development. Because it's one point to say, well, here's this land, we'll help you build here, but, you know, they have to somehow analyze, to have an expert analyze, what's the market gonna be, how they can sustain that business.
Right. So if they built similar facilities, they have to have had some experience as to the type of businesses that will fly or won't fly, that can be
Oh, no
sustained
question.
there.
Well, every business is a marketing analysis to determine whether or not the town of Penfield meets their criteria for whether or not they'll be successful or not. We've been pretty lucky in that regard because we've had a lot of long-term businesses here. You get businesses that come in, and I've seen businesses come in that I know are going to last 6 months because people in this country want to be entrepreneurs. They have an idea that they think is going to fly. For instance, bringing in a high-end restaurant into a town that is basically a family town where you're bringing your kids out to eat every Friday and Saturday night, that restaurant's probably not going to make it long-term because you're not going to get enough people to go there on a sustained basis. Unless you've got something going where you've got a built-in group of people that just love the place and they're going to stay there forever. But even that group of people gets older and they fade away on you. So
What I was getting at was, is there somebody in the business community, either small business, you know, the SBA or the county, that has some experience with that would help
sure.
us to,
So we can-
that would help us to figure out what kind of business, because you want to fill all these new commercial spaces you're gonna put in, and
Absolutely.
it can't be all medical offices, so there's
No,
gonna be some
and we don't want it to be all
lawyers or
medical.
tax guys or that
That's
kind of
right.
stuff, so. but
We
I think
want it to
that-
be a variety of things to
And you
provide
want them to
services.
succeed,
Right.
so maybe somebody with that type of background would be helpful, and
We could get somebody in from the county economic development group that could, yeah, that's a good idea.
I'd
They're
still like
always
to-
more than willing to come out.
I'd still like to see it tied back to the developer. The only reason is that, I mean, and like, I'm not 100% clear on your question is, we can zone to say the zoning for this can be X, Y, or Z, or make a recommendation, but as far as what goes in there, the businesses, we can't, like you said, you guys have been saying, you can't dictate what type of business, as long as it meets the zoning.
Well, that's right.
So the
but
question,
you
I
are
guess,
somewhat tailoring what business you're trying to attract by the mixed-use district. So you want to attract businesses that are gonna make money and are gonna
so
sustain
is your
themselves.
question, do you want to ensure that the amount of, I guess, square footage of the mixed use is is appropriate for what we think you can actually have businesses come in? Again,
Yeah,
I'm
I
still
think
not
that
clear
would
on what you want that expert to tell you is that if it really, businesses drive themselves, so if we zone it for that, those businesses are gonna come in based on, like you said, the demographics they do. We can say, we'd like to see a cafe there, and the guy that talks to us says, yeah, cafe would be great, but if the cafe owner says, hey, I can't sell enough cups of coffee in a month to make this work, it's gonna have to be some other type of business that maybe we would not say would look good or have the right feel for a mixed use. That's, I think your question is that how do we ensure that the businesses that go into mixed use are ones that would be something people would want to walk down from one of those things and actually use? Like a small grocery store, a bodega, or a cafe or something.
I just look at the success that the town has had with that type of business, and it's not very good. Right, I mean, you can rent office spaces and get people.
We have a good mix of business in Penfield that is sustainable. The big problem you run into, we talked about this in the prior session, is the fact that human beings run businesses, and you get situations where human beings don't interact well with their landlords. Or you have a situation where somebody gets sick and they close down because they can't sustain the business anymore. There's a million reasons why businesses fail, and a million reasons why they're successful. The other part of that is Penfield's traditionally said, look, we'd love to have you come in. If you're a good, solid business, we'd love to have you. We are not going to subsidize you to be here, though. I mean, that is what you're here to do. You're here to make money. You're here to, if you're going to come to Penfield, you're going to come here on your own volition, and you're going to operate as you would without us having to, carry you. I mean, that's not doing anybody good in this town if we're carrying every business in town so they can keep their door open. It just tells me that business probably isn't the right business to be here if they can't do that on their own.
Right, no, I agree.
Is there sort of, I don't think there would be legally, but an implied onus on the developer of, the primary developer of the residential portions of a mixed-use development to recruit
Absolutely
retail?
right. Absolutely.
Well, what we're
They're
seeing,
obligated,
yeah, they're obligated to do it.
Okay.
What we're going to see is that obviously, it's driven by rooftops, as we say. You can't throw the businesses in there without people there to support it. So if we look at a very specific example, like the Morgan development, they're going to phase their project in such a way that they will have the rooftops there to support the businesses when they come in, so they don't go under. But before that business comes in, because it's all owned by one entity, and as Jim said earlier, that has often led to more success in a lot of places than having owner-occupied spaces that go under and then get neglected. They can survey the people that are living there and say, hey, who should we be marketing this to? I mean, granted, they have market studies already done. They know, they've done these developments before. They know what types of uses will complement these communities when the time is right. But they have that resource of the people that live there to help guide that process of what's going to be the best business to put in here that not only benefits our residents of this development, but also the general community and bring people in to use it. That's what's going to really make it successful, is that you bring people in from the outside. And that's what our goal is with that little village center that's created there, is that it's also a draw, not just a convenience, but it's also a draw for people to come to that area. So over time, that's what we're looking for. In a way, I was trying to answer your question there. I think certainly by hearing from an expert like Monroe County's Economic Development Group, they're looking at this stuff all over the place, and I think they could tell you what's currently happening out there with all types of development, whether it be mixed use or just in a town like this, or what's happening in Rochester in general, to give you an idea of the different levels of commercial and how it's being how it's being successful.
And Monroe County does a good job. I mean, their economic development group does a good job of trying to bring people in and help them through the process. They've done it with several properties in Penfield. I'm not going to name them off, but they've done several. We'll talk about that as we take our trip. We'll go through that and show you what they've done and what they are doing.
Would the group be interested in hearing from the developer who's kind of quarterbacking that project for Morgan at Atlantic 250? He's a gentleman who's got his experiences in both commercial and residential development, but also the management side of it after it's built. So he gets into the market study before it's built, through the approval process, and then after the fact. Wanted to float that out there, since I don't want to let this drag out to another meeting. If we can get to that person right away, we can try to bring them in if people feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I like maybe a combination of the economic advisor and
Yep.
the developer together.
We're looking at meetings if we
Maybe
can
at the
double
same
up.
time, but
Yeah,
you
not at the
know.
same time.
He may be able to knock off several on the list.
We're
Yeah,
looking
we'll
at
have a
some
small
that-
TED Talk, why not?
The flip side of that coin,
Yes.
don't you think we should hear from somebody about where agriculture is going?
We've got somebody coming.
And we've
Yeah,
got it on our list.
That's what on my list is, yeah.
We're looking at a traditional farmer, so you've got, you know, normal row
Well,
crops and everything else, and then you've got,
We have such a significant portion of the town that is
Yep.
I feel like it's kind of missing that part of the conversation. I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but that's, because I'm not knowledgeable at all. And so, I mean, I definitely
That
want
was
to
a
talk to,
big,
you
that
know.
was a big component of the 2010 plan. It's something that certainly will not be ignored in this one either.
Yeah, and again, so there is a lot of good research out there, but I'd like to talk to some of the larger, farmers out there now, and they could come and say, let's talk to you a little bit about, you know,
We are
Their
going to
insight,
bring
you know.
in, we're going to bring in two, actually. We're going to bring in Dave Woodward, who's more of your traditional farmer. But he's so knowledgeable about farming all over the country, it's unbelievable. The other person we're trying to bring in is Bill Wickham, because he is now your agritourism type guy. And so there's two levels there that might
so he
be
can
some-
talk about some of the businesses we've seen where the hard cider and those, okay, all right.
Well, I think Dave could do it as well. Dave's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, I mean, we all know ag and markets has completely changed in the last 10 years about what is considered agriculture. And they do it to support the industry because they want to give people options to be successful in it.
Oh, yeah, and like I said, that research is, there's a lot
Oh, yeah.
that you can figure out. I mean the actual true tools in the dirt farmer, that's the conversation I want to have. The agriculture side of, you know, the development and those things,
Yeah.
there's enough information out there, you can find that on the internet
Oh, yeah.
yourself, to educate yourself, but,
It's in the newspaper every weekend.
yeah.
What is a solar farm considered? How would
under,
that be zoned?
It's not really an agricultural component. It's,
Yeah.
although you can grow
Can
crops
mix it.
under these, you can
Yep.
mix them. They're doing that around the country now where they've got certain types of crops that they can, they're low growing crops, they plant them underneath the cells.
They spread out the panels more so you get a mix of sun and shade.
And you're able to go through and harvest them and maintain them.
In some of the desert communities out west now, they're creating farmland underneath it's really cool, yeah.
Well, that's another thing to talk about because it's becoming very, very popular. We just built a solar park out here by the garage. So we're getting a lot of people interested in solar and not just putting them on your roof. They want
Fields.
panels in their backyards.
They
They
want
eat up a
fields.
lot of their yards. So
Hmm.
it's something to look at.
So what are the other ones that we already have kind of on the list that you guys already were thinking of bringing in?
Well, we talked about Dave
Right.
and
Bill.
Bill. We've got this guy Matt Ingalls. Matt
could-
Ingalls is a
He would be able to
planner.
hit a lot of your
He's
points
the-
on your list.
And
Planning.
what is he?
He's the
or-
professional
He's a
planner
professional
that Jim
planner.
spoke of.
He actually
okay.
assisted us on the 2010 plan.
Yep.
He's assisted us on other studies in the community. He's worked on our local waterfront revitalization program. He's currently doing that for the town of Arundecoit.
He's done a lot of comprehensive plans for several
He
communities.
does a lot of work in New York State and in Pennsylvania, I think, and in Maryland. So he's got a good handle on what's happening in terms of trends and what people's wants and needs are throughout the country. He'll be very interesting to listen to.
so I had the Genesee Land Trust on my list of
Right, yeah. I have
people
that on
to
too,
talk about preservation. The school district, talk to the school, whether Mark St. Suchi or Alan McNiff to talk about what their expansion plans are. Emergency services, we've heard that earlier on, what their wants and needs are moving forward. I had the library board sent in a kind of a letter, but you know, what their thoughts are expansion. We've had recreation come and talk. I had DPW talk about, you know, where they see is, you know, trying to service the town from plowing and growing with that. I also had talked about the golf courses, whether the Odenbach family would want to come in and talk about how they function at Shadow Lake right now, where they see their future going. If this group's going to look at, you know, what the potential for their property is, give them at least the
Well, I think
opportunity for a counterpoint to.
globally, I guess across the town, all of the golf courses, I mean, need to be, I think we need to look at the zoning on all of them, because if one could do like Shadow Pines, In some cases, that was almost, seemed like it was overnight. What's the impact of another one of them falls in the same situation? It would be better to have the zoning and planning in place now, or make the recommendation now.
And that's why I think at least, open it up to the owners of the golf courses to come in and talk about, what difficulties do they see, what do they see their future as. They've kind of tried to diversify, similar to, farming and agriculture. It's hard to be kind of in just one realm anymore. You've kind of got to diversify. Shadow Lake's got
Mark, is either
weddings and
is either Penfield or Shadow Lake gonna come in here and tell us one way or the other, honestly, what their future plans are?
Yeah, I was just thinking.
I mean, if I was running a private club like that, I wouldn't come in and tell
Well,
you
on the
that.
one side, Odin Box could explain in greater detail what happened at Shadow Pines. That would force that to come about if people don't already know. But you're right.
I mean, to be honest.
We could also hear from them just
Yeah,
where do you
talking
see
to
where do you
them
see
about-
golf going?
Well, it'd be interesting to know what their
We know
plans
where
are, their immediate plans
Yeah,
are for the property, because they're putting a lot of money into that building right now. So I'd like to know what their intent is over the next several years. Yeah, but you're right, I mean, the economy drives everything, and if the economy goes
I just think
downhill.
our time is not limited, but I mean, there's other stuff we could be talking about that probably,
I mean,
in
it's-
my opinion, we'd get better information on than.
I mean,
Well, that's what we want to hear from
I mean,
you.
it's easy for us to take a look at the golf courses where they currently are, what's going on with the property around them, and just make a recommendation based on that. I mean, again, the business is a business. They can come in and tell us all the plans in the world, but, somebody dies that's running the place, or they go into bankruptcy, the next thing you guys know, you've got another golf course on your hands. It would be better to plan, I hate to say the word worst case scenario, but it's better to plan the zoning for, if it's not a golf course tomorrow, as a community, what do we want that land to be? Because that's our charter, that's our charter, not how the golf course is going to maintain itself, but what are we going to do with the property if the golf course isn't there?
But I think that conversation then has to include somebody from Dolomite, because it has to include the quarry. Because the quarry at some point is gonna cease operation, and you've got the two golf courses, well, you got now.
Well, the
not
golf
Buckle,
course-
you've
the
got
golf
stuff
courses are-
flanking it. It's.
Yeah, but the golf
they
courses
have to
aren't
broaden
part
this
of
one, so-
Dolomite anymore.
No,
That's-
I understand that, but if you're thinking not 5 years out or even 10 years out, but you're thinking 20 or 30 years out, the way, I think it would be really valuable, I mean, a valuable perspective is to say, look at that whole zone, as you know that there's a reasonable chance that Shadow Lake will maybe not be a golf course one of these days. And then you have Shadow Pines on one side that is presumably going to be at least mostly sort of recreational on the other side. And then you have a quarry that's going to go out of business at some point. They're going to stop everything, all their operations, and there's going to be a lake with probably 150 acre lake in the middle of it once they stop pumping the water out of it. To consider that whole area as what do we see as the potential for that entire zone, from Shadow Lake on one side to Shadow Pines on the other with the quarry in the middle, to really consider that and to understand from somebody from Dolomite's parent company or whatever what their game plan is. I mean, I've looked at the DEC filings and stuff.
Well,
they
their
just keep
game plan
getting
is to run that for at
extensions.
least 30 more years. Even if they don't use it for stone, which they probably won't
No, I
after
know, they're
30.
using it as a
But they're going to
transit
continue to
facility
use it
now.
to make asphalt, because that's where the money is.
So I think, I want to go back to Matthew's point earlier. We can bring them in here. The chances they're going to give us any insight into what their
Well, they don't
business
know.
plan is.
They're not gonna know.
I don't think even if they know, they're going to share it. I mean, not to be negative about it, but I don't think they're going to share that with us, or they're going to paint us a much rosier picture.
I don't think there's any chance in the next year, 10 years, that Shadow Lake is anything other than what it is. I think the proof's in the pudding. They wouldn't have, after the fire, they wouldn't have as aggressively gone back in to rebuild the
Right.
place if they didn't plan
I
on
agree.
it operating as it is. If your plan is to go in another direction, you take those proceeds and do something else.
Well, I think the recommendation is well stated. We should look at there and say, okay, our zoning recommendation for Dolomite, if it's not Dolomite, is X. We should be part of our recommendation, but I don't think Dolomite's going to come in and give us any information. I
We can
think
do that without speakers.
we don't need a speaker from them in order to make that recommendation.
How long are they quarry permitted for?
They can go on forever if they want.
Yeah.
And they're going to go on for quite some time yet, because
They're still
we're
mining.
still blasting, and they still got room to blast. The second part is.
Well, they're transferring a lot more in now than they used to.
Yeah, but they're still making asphalt there. That's what the money is for them is right now. It's just too convenient to be close to the expressways and have to go all the way out to Walworth or go to Henrietta.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I still think that Donna's recommendation is well placed. We should at least take a look at the property
Oh, yeah.
as a group and say, you know what, okay, because Shadow Pines, we know we've done this. Shadow Lake conceivably could be in a similar situation down the road, and you've got to, maybe we need to go figure out we can get some of that property for the lakefront, huh?
Well, but, I mean, and that's why saving Shadow Pines was a big thing, because if that does become a lake, and the town does decide to buy it, or somebody decides to buy it, you need that land from Shadow Pines to grade, just to kind of grade down so that it would be actually usable. People could use it as a lake and that sort of stuff, and have an access point, stuff like that. So I just think we got a chance once every 10 years. Let's take advantage and at least have a look. And
Sure,
give it
I
some
just
thought.
don't think anybody's gonna come in here and tell you the truth.
That's okay, yeah, but I just want to make sure it's sort of on our plate.
Not tell you the truth.
They're not gonna know.
They're not gonna know, and they're not gonna be.
Nobody's gonna reveal their business.
Thank you, Harold.
So
that's what
as
I
a
was trying to
segue
say.
from all that, since it doesn't sound like we want to really hear too much from Odenbox, perhaps we can speak with Matt Angles or other planning professionals who have seen this type of transition of land use, and they could come in with information of what they've seen in the country, and then you can base some information on that.
That actually makes sense.
If he has experience in that, we can tap that knowledge. If not, we can pursue other options.
Who else? What other groups? And obviously you've kind of got some smaller stuff and we can intersperse those with, who we bring in. We were kind of just, brainstorming of, who the group might want to hear from, but
You talked about the companies providing the services for plowing and things like that. Could you expand just a little bit on that speaker?
that's our public works. So right now they do road plowing, paving, sanitary storm sewer system. Obviously, they've got an aging building right now, and they're looking at, do they rebuild in place? Do they relocate that building? What do they do for their future? So I think having them come in and share that pretty much 50% of the town is developed, we've still got, at some point, more room to develop. They need to add more plow trucks, they need to add more sidewalk plows as time goes on. We've got more pump stations to maintain and other stuff that, at least have them share, where they're looking at, the town growing is, how do they grow as well? Do they grow in place? And really not for this group, maybe the master plan of how that lays out, but it's just another piece to the puzzle is, same as recreation kind of shared, their thoughts and what their future development might
So
be.
you talk about the library. Is there any value in having like a similar conversation with the courts?
And we can bring the courts in. Those are the.
I'm just tossing that out to the group. I mean, it makes sense to talk from the sense the library's got, but because of the shared
Yeah,
situation
you've
they
got
got
the
there,
three pieces in there.
we haven't heard from them. We'll hear from the other two. I mean, is there value in having somebody?
And we can reach out to them and see. We've gotten a letter from the seniors, or at least a group of them saying we need space as well. Initially we'd kind of looked at they may go along with recreation. I think Chris kind of shared that they may kind of share space together, but it has all the pieces of the community center as it sits currently.
And you don't have to commit tonight, obviously, we're gonna be here for a while together, so if something pops up over the next several weeks, and you need to talk to somebody about some particular issue, whether it's transportation, or whatever the case may be, we can certainly bring those people in for you.
How about somebody talking about branding or marketing? Remember we talked about last time that, how do we, I forget the way it was phrased, but the image of the town or the...
Yeah, that might be a little difficult, only because we haven't got a consultant per se, and we would probably have to bring somebody on board. We could bring somebody, and they just generally would talk about branding, if you'd like to do that. Somebody who's done it for other communities.
Term on the agenda. Community character and design.
Well, that came from the existing comp plan. That was a section in there talking about the built environment that is Penfield. it wasn't so much of the marketing aspect of it, but it was a topic that's been talked about. Is how do people see Penfield? What brings people to Penfield? What keeps them in Penfield? Yeah, we can look into that.
I mean, we talked about, like, if you're over by Baytown Plaza, most people don't realize they're in Penfield.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's exactly
okay.
right.
Yeah. So that comes down to, like Jim said, we're starting to make measures with them so that they physically label themselves as Penfield, New York, and it's misconceptions that we've been trying to right for such a long time, and perhaps we have to look at how signing is permitted so that you could allow someone to have additional signing besides their business or something. We have signs all around the town's perimeter where it says "Welcome to Penfield," "Now entering Penfield." People don't often pay attention to that, but it's there. That's kind of like our first attempt at showing you that, and then we always try to redirect people to like our public GIS viewer similar to this, so you can actually see where your house is in Penfield, even though you think you're in Webster. It's a tough battle.
Our signs are not very creative. They're just road signs.
What are you talking about?
Well, like, for example, about where I live is a 5 Mile Line. Okay, you go into Webster, there's a big sign where life is worth living.
Yeah.
You're coming the opposite direction. The Penfield sign looks like it's made by the.
That's true. We put them on the major thoroughfares. We put them on Penfield Road. We put them on Empire Boulevard.
You've got some other ones, 441. as
They're
you come into
street
the town.
signs, guys. They're not.
No. We have the big green and gold.
If you come down
leaf and all that.
441 right
We
by
have
Channing
them.
Philbrick
But
Park.
we do
there's
not.
one.
You're right. We do not have them on 5 Mile Line Road. There is not one there. You're right.
Yeah, there are gaps in that.
And that might be a
in that
recommendation.
signage.
Maybe we need to have more of them in more visible locations than we have now. But we do have them in certain locations throughout the community as you come into town. But as you're coming into town, you may be coming into town at 55 miles or 60 miles an hour, and the last thing you're looking at as the car coming up,
really
as you're
big
coming up
sign.
behind the back of
Yes,
the car
we
during
all
rush
know
hour
the
is a
limits.
sign that says
Right.
"Welcome to Penfield."
That's why we need the courts.
That's a good point.
You always need
It's
the
a very
courts.
good point. I mean, you look at that.
What's the
all
overall?
the major plazas.
So, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, but from a comp plan perspective, what would our focus be?
They would, to his point, it's an element of that community character, and we could compose something in I can't talk. Compose something in there that addresses that and makes it a goal of the town's, or a recommendation, or a goal, however
So,
you phrase it.
it's part of your narrative
It's a
is-
goal or recommendation
So I
to the
get the
town
goal,
board for them to
but
consider.
what are we looking, so obviously is to have some type of a marketing, some type of a recommendation. I'm just saying, I'd be interested in the group to say, what is it we want to accomplish with that?
Yeah.
Are we just trying to make people happy that they live in Penfield? Are we trying to draw other people into Penfield? Are we trying to build some level of community awareness? What's our goal? And those goals would then drive our recommendations from a marketing perspective. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, that's all things. Please keep track of that, because I think that's something that down the line, all good talking points and things to expand upon for the document.
Yeah, that's the making of the goals that we'd have for the next
I used to
one
take a
is
lot
to-
more notes, and then I noticed everything is, I can go back, it's easier to
Yep.
take
Watch
notes
everything.
watching it, and then, yeah.
Very helpful.
Say, as Jim said, we don't want to put you on the spot if you don't speak tonight or say the one it's not a done deal. We were kind of just looking ahead as we're starting to plan out next meetings if there's some synergies and we can bring in the farmers and agricultural on the same night. It might make sense for for timing with that, and if we can do a developer with economic development and give each of them an hour or something to do it, we can kind of start planning ahead. I know I contacted Matt, the planner. He's not available at your next meeting. He said possibly the 5th. He's waiting to see if he has a meeting, if not the 19th. We'll kind of plug him in, but then we can start looking at other meetings and try to start scheduling people in there and having some more interaction.
What was the elder, you said you had a letter or request from a group?
I mean, it wasn't a group. We had a senior saying, and I don't, maybe that just went into Google Docs, saying that they would like
to shadows.
Okay, maybe we can copy that over. The Shadow Pines group, sorry. Too many Tuesday night meetings. They got a letter from the Shadow Pines group saying, hey, don't forget about us. The seniors would like space as well. In the community center, we're currently cramped in the space we have. If and when the new community center is planned, whether it's at shadows or not, they just said, you know, we'd like to be considered and, you know, we'd like some.
So that would be, that would go to a broader conversation about having a representative from a group that would be able to talk to, you know, from a standpoint of you know, maybe senior needs, because it's becoming more and more relevant with each passing year. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that would look like, but, or who that would be, but somebody that could, or maybe one or two somebodies that could be representative.
Yeah. So we'll make sure we get the letter into your Google Docs, but I say that went to the Shadow Pines group, so my apologies for.
How dare you mix those up?
Yeah.
We said we're gonna let you go home early, I guess.
We tried.
1 minute to 9 would be early, I guess, but.
So we're 10 minutes of, we still got your scheduled next meeting. Still want to throw back out there, is an earlier time, and then Heidi, I know you're going to give me face, is an earlier time better for the group? Tonight we have better attendance, that's great, we just want to make sure we keep our attendance up. It was starting to wane there a little bit. Is 7 o'clock still the best time for the group? Would 6 o'clock work better?
Throwing it out there.
7 o'clock still the best time?
9 o'clock, Heidi?
No,
Would 9 o'clock be
I
good?
have a time.
So just want to make sure we're accommodating the group so we have the best attendance possible. If 7 o'clock still works for everybody and that's the best time, we'll keep it there, but just want to float it out.
And is everyone still comfortable with the every other, like twice a month meeting still? Yeah.
It's February break.
And we don't necessarily have to do that. As we get through a lot of the speakers, and we'll try and give you a break here and there so you're not here every other Tuesday.
Well, as we get into later writing the document, that maybe once a month or
Every other.
or every other.
You guys
You know,
almost gotta tell us that, because we gotta keep on your schedule if you're gone.
Well, I just want to know, like, is this a good pace for everyone right now as we go through like that
Are y'all
education
comfortable
process
still?
and we want to bring these guests in? Is this a good pace for everyone? Where you're, you know, retaining the information, we're coming in with new questions and stuff, and if you're comfortable with that, we'll keep on this pace and start bringing these guest presenters to have these interactive conversations with you.
Yes, I'll say yes.
Everybody's good?
Yeah.
Yes.
okay. Thanks. Just a little.
Thanks for hanging in there with us.
Sure.
It was the day I was looking for.
Good night, be safe.
See you next
Thank
time.
you.
Fantastic.
9 o'clock.